Welcome, everyone, and welcome back if you have been to one of our webinars before. My name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs. And while we're giving everyone a minute to get in and get settled, please feel free to share where you are joining us from today in the chat section. Before we dive into our webinar today, I'm going to cover a couple housekeeping items. Don't worry about needing to take detailed notes, as this webinar will be recorded, and a link to the video, as well as any resources shared within the presentation, will be sent out to you within a week or so to the email address you used to register for today's event. Please note that this presentation has been pre-recorded, but the Q&A portion that will follow the presentation is going to be conducted live with one of our career experts. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, please make sure to put it in the Q&A section of Big Marker rather than the chat section. This really helps us keep track of questions in one place, and the Q&A section also allows you to click a thumbs up button if someone else has asked a question that you want to hear the answer to, so that we can see which questions are most popular. We probably won't be able to answer everyone's question today, but we can almost guarantee that you will learn something helpful. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we're going to go over different types of recruiters that are out there, what their functions are, and why it's worth trying to connect with them when you're searching for jobs. Next, we'll discuss some of the strategies that you can use to identify the recruiters that you might want to reach out to. Then we'll talk about the types of things that you should include in your outreach to recruiters and go over a couple samples of what those messages might look like. And for the final portion of our main presentation, we'll examine a few tips provided by professional recruiters and talent acquisition specialists. And then lastly, we will end our webinar today with our live audience Q&A so that you can ask your own questions directly with one of our career experts. So let's begin the conversation by taking a look at the role of the recruiter and some reasons why it can be beneficial to connect with them. So the purpose of a recruiter, the reason that companies hire them, is to find, screen, and interview candidates during the initial stages of a hiring process. They can then make recommendations for which candidates should continue on in that process, and will pass those recommendations along to the hiring manager. To do this, they use a variety of methods to source potential candidates. They review resumes and other application materials, and will even conduct phone screens or first-round interviews before deciding who to recommend. Some people have the misconception that recruiters work for job seekers, but that's not actually accurate. While yes, recruiters want to make sure that you are well suited for the job and well prepared for the interview process, they actually work on behalf of the company that is trying to fill the position. Because of this, they are responsible for putting the company's best interests first, and there may be potential details about the position or the company that they're not able to share with you. Some recruiters, though, will give you advice and suggestions for improving your candidacy because they want to successfully fill the position and they might see strong potential in you. So that means if a recruiter suggests that you make some adjustments to your resume or maybe mentions things to focus on during an interview, you should more than likely follow their advice. There are also different types of recruiters that you might encounter, but they primarily fall into two main categories. You have internal or corporate recruiters and external or agency recruiters. Internal recruiters are called corporate recruiters because they work for and are employed by the company or corporation. They usually are a member of their human resources department and are sometimes classified more specifically as members of the talent acquisition team. A benefit of working with internal recruiters is that they often have more intimate insights into the company itself, including, its mission, its culture, the organizational structure, things like that. And they also likely have firsthand experience in working with the hiring managers with whom they partner. External recruiters are often called agency recruiters because they work for third-party organizations that are hired by or contracted with various companies to fill open positions. Essentially, they serve as like an intermediary between you and the companies with which they are contracted. Companies will often employ external recruiters if, excuse me, they don't have the capacity to have their own talent acquisition team, or if they hire for so many roles that they need the extra support of a third-party organization. And there are also two main types of external recruiters. There are retained recruiters and contingent recruiters. Retained recruiters are engaged by companies to fill a specific position, usually a higher level or executive level role, and are typically paid a portion of their fee up front, with the rest coming in installments or once the position is actually filled. Retained recruiters often have a more deeper involvement in the recruiting and hiring process and a clear understanding of the company's hiring strategy. They take their time to find the best possible candidates to fill each role. Contingent recruiters are only paid a fee if their referred candidate is actually hired by the client company, which is why they're called contingent recruiters, because their payment is contingent upon placement of a candidate. They are competing with other internal or external recruiters and tend to work on a larger volume of roles within the mid and lower levels of an organization. And contingent recruiters typically work faster, but they have less intimate knowledge of the organization and can sometimes make you feel pressured to take a role because they are in competition with other recruiters. This is important to note because you should never let a recruiter pressure you into a position that isn't a good fit for you. And of course, within all these different categories of recruiters, you also find niche or specialty recruiters, like ones focused on different fields like healthcare or sales or technical positions. These specialty recruiters tend to have more knowledge about their specific field or industry than a more generalized recruiter would. Now, how do you determine which recruiter is the right one for you to try to connect with? If you are already currently employed while looking for another job, it can be a good idea to try to network and build relationships with internal recruiters at some of your companies of interest. The reason this is advantageous is because they already work and have relationships with key stakeholders in various departments, and an introduction from an internal recruiter could help put you on the fast track to an interview. If you don't have a lot of time to focus on your search, identifying and reaching out to contingent recruiters might be your best strategy because they are financially incentivized to present you to as many hiring managers as possible. Again, though, they might not necessarily be trying to find the best fit for you, just simply a fit so that they can obtain their fee from their client company. So it is important to note that distinction. So that was a lot of information on different types of recruiters, but hopefully it helps paint a clearer picture of the different backgrounds and motivations of recruiters that you might encounter during your search, and also help you better understand what type of recruiter you might want to seek out and connect with. Which brings us to our next point. Why bother trying to connect with recruiters? The biggest reason is because they, for the most part, work fairly closely with the companies that employ them. They have a more complete knowledge of the different types of job openings at different companies. This means that they could potentially provide helpful details about open positions beyond what is listed in the job description, and they may be able to help you tap into what is referred to as the hidden job market. The hidden job market essentially refers to positions that have not been posted yet for one reason or another. Like maybe the company doesn't want to invest the time and the cost needed to fill the role through traditional means, or maybe they have a preference for working directly with candidates that are referred by trusted sources. So tapping into and connecting with recruiters can help you access that hidden job market more easily. Recruiters can also help connect you with other recruiters in their network. Maybe you aren't the right fit for a role that they're trying to fill, but they know other recruiters who are filling different positions that could align well with your skills and experience. Or they could refer you to specialized recruiters that hire for your specific field or industry. Recruiters also have a tangible incentive to find the right candidates to fill open roles. While it's important to remember that they work for the company, not for you, they are incentivized to fill roles quickly and effectively. So developing good relationships with recruiters can help you get moved along through the hiring process more efficiently. And lastly, if you take the time to develop strong relationships with recruiters, there is a good chance that they will keep you in mind for future roles. Recruiters are often looking for ways to expand their candidate pools, so taking the time to connect and engage with recruiters can help keep you top of mind. And at the very least, it's a good idea to connect with recruiters because it can really only help your chances. The only way it could hurt your chances is if you communicate in a demanding or disrespectful way. So just make sure that you are minding your manners, behaving professionally, and then hopefully connecting with recruiters can lead to some positive results for you. Okay, so now we will discuss some of the strategies that you can employ to try to identify recruiters so that you can then conduct your outreach to those recruiters. So in terms of where to search for recruiters, LinkedIn is the primary social media platform to use when searching for recruiters because it's essentially the social media platform that is designed for professional purposes. We'll take a deeper dive into LinkedIn on the next few slides, but this should be one of your main areas of focus. You can, of course, try other social media platforms as well, since a lot of recruiters like to actively create content related to hiring and recruitment. So it's possible you could find recruiters and open roles through platforms like Twitter or X, TikTok, and Instagram as well. You can also tap into your search engine of choice by searching for terms like recruiting firms or the word recruiter, followed by your industry and your location. Some companies will include company directories on their websites, so you can search those resources as well. Just look for people with terms like recruiter, hiring manager, or talent acquisition in their job titles. Tapping into your own personal and professional networks can also be really helpful. You might not know any recruiters directly, but chances are good that people in your network might. So be willing to reach out to your connections to see if anyone knows a recruiter that they could potentially connect you with. Often professional associations will have connections with recruiters because recruiters want to, expand their candidate pool like we talked about. And they might sometimes host in-person or virtual conferences with recruiters from their industry of focus in attendance. So tapping into those types of professional associations and actively engaging in conferences can also be a good way to connect with recruiters. And lastly, you can also look through high profile publications to maybe find recruitment agencies or even specific recruiters. Forbes, for example, occasionally releases rankings of top recruiters. So something like that could be a helpful resource to you in your research. Okay, so back to the topic of LinkedIn. This can be one of your best resources for finding internal recruiters working in talent acquisition for specific companies. When you're on LinkedIn, you'll first want to go to the search bar at the top and type in the name of a company that you're interested in potentially working for. Once you're on that company's page, you should be able to see a tab titled People. These are employees of the company that are actively using LinkedIn, which tends to be true of most recruiters since a lot of their efforts to contact and engage with potential candidates is conducted through LinkedIn. As you'll see in the right-hand screenshot on this slide, once you click on the People tab, you should be able to do a keyword search or use one of the pre-established filters like the ones called what they do or what they are skilled at to look for recruiters, hiring managers, or people with talent acquisition or human resources in their job title. If searching this way yields multiple recruiters, try to see if any of them, either in their tagline or their title or listed on their profiles, mentions the specific type of recruiting that their role is focused on to help narrow things down. Because we mentioned earlier that there are different types of specialty recruiters. So different companies may have, for example, a technical recruiter and a sales recruiter. So you want to make sure you're trying to find the right recruiter. You can also scroll further to the right of the pre-established filters to see if you maybe have any first or second degree connections at the company. It's often helpful, if possible, to request an introduction from a mutual connection in the hopes that your outreach will be better received. So if you have a first or second degree connection, you could try to get an introduction to a recruiter working with that company. And then also, sometimes job postings will actually list the point of contact or the hiring manager for that specific role. And in these instances, your job is a lot easier because you can then just use the search bar to simply search for that person's name on LinkedIn. It doesn't happen a lot that they will actually list the point of contact, but at least keep your eye out for that just in case it is listed. Here's another way to find potential recruiters on LinkedIn by leveraging that search function. By typing in recruiter and then clicking the people filter, you'll easily be able to find a wide range of professionals with recruiter listed somewhere on their profile. You can also get more specific by typing in recruiter and a company name to try to locate recruiters within specific organizations. Or if you don't have target companies specifically in mind, you can type in recruiter and an industry or a type of role, like with that last example on this slide where I used customer success as a sample there. I just wanted to include these strategies as well in case you don't have much initial luck when searching through the people tabs of specific companies. So now that we have talked about the ways you can try to find recruiters, let's talk about actually connecting and communicating with recruiters that you wish to contact. So the first way of improving your ability to connect with recruiters is to focus on your visibility. We've mentioned already that LinkedIn is a primary tool that recruiters use to search for and source candidates, which means that you want to make sure that you are optimizing your profile and improving your visibility on LinkedIn to increase the chances of catching the attention of potential recruiters. So how do you improve your visibility? The first thing you want to make sure you do is get your profile up to date, meaning that all your relevant experience is listed, the dates are accurate, and your descriptions of past experiences are filled out in a way that highlights your relevant transferable skills, your proudest accomplishments, and the positive impact that you provided in each role. You don't want to make the mistake of just listing out the tasks and responsibilities that you've held in previous positions. You want to go beyond that to demonstrate more relevancy to your field and your target roles. Next, you want to think about those target roles. I just mentioned relevance as being important. So analyze the things that you've done in the past in comparison to what you hope to do in the future, and then make sure your descriptions of your past experiences are focused on what will be relevant and important to your future audiences. A good tip for doing this is to review position descriptions for jobs that look appealing to you, then use the types of things you see listed in those descriptions to guide the way that you describe your own past experiences. This might even mean that you are, dialing back or even omitting things that aren't going to be relevant to your target role. So just kind of keep that in mind and use those position descriptions as a guide, as well as other research that you're doing on your target roles or your industry or companies of interest. Similarly, you want to make sure that you're using keywords that will be relevant and impactful to your field of interest throughout your profile. Recruiters will search for candidates on LinkedIn using keywords, so you want to make sure that industry-specific keywords are included where applicable and appropriate, of course, in your profile. It's also a really good idea to have a personalized, targeted summary or about section on your profile. You can almost think of this as like your personal branding statement. You want to use it to highlight the key skills and expertise that you bring to the table, as well as emphasizing some past accomplishments that can demonstrate your potential for future success. And using keywords like we just mentioned in your summary is also a good idea because this will help capture the attention of your intended audience more quickly. You should also make sure that you are optimizing your headline or your tagline, which is directly under your profile picture, as this will usually be the first thing that others see when looking at your profile. So avoid having your headline simply display your current or most recent job title, which is what LinkedIn will automatically default to if you don't edit your headline. So instead, use keywords from your field that will help others quickly identify your areas of expertise. And you can also add in something about, what energizes or motivates you about your work. So for example, my headline reads career development, training and instruction, empowering professionals for success. This way, others will quickly understand what my background is and the motivators that drive my career. Make sure that you have thoroughly filled out your skills section using industry specific keywords. Again, you can use job descriptions to help guide you in determining what skills to include. And it also doesn't hurt to have others endorse you for your skills. So I always recommend going to the profiles of other people with whom you are connected with, and then endorsing them for their skills, as often they will then return the favor. Engaging actively on LinkedIn is also a really important component of using it effectively. This doesn't mean that you need to, dive right into creating your own posts, but it's much easier to grow your network and increase your visibility if you are actively, liking, commenting on, and sharing the posts of others. Eventually, you might be comfortable enough to start creating and sharing your own posts about your areas of expertise, but liking, commenting, and sharing is a good way to start. Again, for example, I usually post 2 to 3 times a week to share insights and advice about the job search process, as well as commenting on 5 or more posts a day by others in my industry to show that, I appreciate their content and want to, add value or add new perspectives to the conversation. And lastly, if you're comfortable, go ahead and utilize the open to work banner on LinkedIn. You may have heard some people saying that it could reflect negatively on you, but the vast majority of recruiters that I'm connected with and speak to emphasize that this helps maximize your visibility, because they being recruiters are able to search LinkedIn using that feature as a filter to find people who are open for new opportunities. So once you have gone through the effort of identifying the appropriate recruiter, you need to think about your outreach strategy. Crafting a strong message and sending your outreach at the appropriate time can make a big difference in how your message will be received. One of the main reasons that you want to find the right recruiter is because you should be sending your outreach after you have applied to the position. Trying to message a recruiter to ask, what type of roles might be a good fit for me, or, just sending along your resume and asking if they have jobs you should apply to is a waste of time. The recruiter will likely ignore your message if you haven't taken the time and the initiative to research and apply for positions that fit your skills and experience first. So when reaching out to the recruiter, you want to clearly and concisely mention your enthusiasm for the role that you applied for and the company, as well as a few tangible reasons why you would be a good fit for this role. Make sure to emphasize those relevant accomplishments or skills that will allow you to have a positive impact in this position. Again, be clear and concise. You don't need to make this first message a full, pitch of all that you bring to the table. That can come later after you've gotten their attention and they've shown willingness to connect and engage with you further. Try to be straight to the point with this initial outreach. If they respond saying that they aren't in charge of the hiring for this role, or if you're forced to reach out to someone with a more general role in human resources because you couldn't maybe find the right recruiter, ask them politely and professionally if they would be willing to direct you to the right person. If you don't hear back from them within a week or so, make sure that you follow up with them. Recruiters tend to not mind when people follow up because it shows persistence and it can help remind them of your initial outreach, which, they may have read your initial outreach with the intention of getting back to you, then simply forgotten to do so because something else came up. If you don't hear from them after you followed up, it can be a good idea to start looking for other recruiters with that company. It's also a good idea to stay in touch with recruiters. The role you first applied to and contacted them about might not have been the right fit for you, but future roles that are better aligned with your skill set could arise. So it's helpful to maintain the relationship so you aren't starting from scratch each time, especially if it's a company that you really want to work for. Sending something simple like, I just saw this recent article about how your company is doing XYZ. That sounds like it has the potential to drive a lot of new growth, and I wish you all the best with this strategy. Something simple like that can be a great way to demonstrate that you're keeping your finger on the pulse of your industry and that company. So here is a sample email message that you could send a recruiter if you've managed to locate their email address. And I'll pause for a moment here to give everyone a chance to read this message. So obviously with email, you can expand a bit more than you could in a LinkedIn connection note, which is limited to 300 characters. But you still want to make sure that you're trying to be clear and concise. So try to keep the initial outreach brief. You can see, though, that this message contains the primary elements of a good message that we discussed on the previous slide, which is what you want to aim for, even though your personal style and tone might be a little different when it comes to the actual text of the message. But this is a good sample of what that email outreach can look like. Here is a sample message that you can send when connecting with a recruiter through LinkedIn. Anytime that you are trying to invite someone to connect with you, and especially if it isn't someone you already personally know, it's a good idea to add a note to your connection request. You can see the arrow on the slide pointing to that add a note button. It helps demonstrate that you are, professional and respectful of others. So I'll pause a moment again so you can read this message. So you probably noticed that this message is missing the component of the enthusiasm for the company, unlike the email message we just looked at. Because you are limited to 300 characters, you may need to omit certain things that you would otherwise want to include. This means that, depending on the situation, you'll have to prioritize what you want to get across to the recruiter in your initial outreach. But as long as you grab their attention, you'll still be able to communicate with them in more detail later on. So because it's important to apply for positions before contacting a recruiter, it's worth spending some time discussing the ways to effectively target your approach for each application. What I mean by this is that it's important to tailor your application materials, meaning your resume and your cover letter, for each individual role. Gone are the days where a one-size-fits-all resume and cover letter will work. So instead, you need to thoroughly review position descriptions to understand the essential elements of the role and conduct research on the company and the market in which they operate so that you have a strong understanding of what will be most relevant and important to them. Then modify and edit your documents so that you're including your most relevant skills, experience, and accomplishments, as well as incorporating keywords and phrases from the job posting into your materials to help catch the recruiter's attention when they are initially scanning your resume. This is important because recruiters and hiring managers see a lot of applications and typically only spend initially 6 to 8 seconds reviewing a resume, unless that is you are able to catch their attention with relevant and impactful information about your experience, most relevant skills, and most impactful accomplishments that will matter to them and make them want to keep reading. So you want to keep in mind that while your application materials are technically about you, you should really be trying to make it about them and their needs. One of the most effective ways to do this is to leverage a professional summary and key contribution section at the top of your resume. You can then customize these sections for each role. This is especially useful considering that these two sections are the first ones that a recruiter is likely to read, so you can quickly show your fit for the position and catch their attention. It's also smart to modify, edit, and reorganize your bullet points describing your past roles so that you can focus on what is most relevant. You don't need to include everything that you've ever done in each resume that you send out. Just focus on what is most relevant to this new audience. I often recommend, and actually use this strategy myself, having a master resume or multiple master resumes if you're targeting a few different types of roles. This master resume can be, 3 or more pages long with everything you've ever done. Then when you find a job that you want to apply to, make a copy of that master resume, cut out things that aren't relevant or might make it repetitive until you get down to 2 pages, and then heavily tailor your summary section before submitting your application. This will save you time and make this tailoring process easier for you. It's also really important to tailor your cover letters as well. Start your introduction by mentioning your specific interests in this role and this company, highlighting things that you discovered when researching their organization. Then in your body paragraphs, give them, 3 to 5 in-depth examples of how you have successfully done the type of work that's outlined in the position description. This will make your cover letter more relevant to this audience and increase your chances of catching their attention. And always, whether in your cover letter or your resume, emphasize your positive impact. How the things that you did achieved positive results or led to improvements for your teammates, your customers, or the company. You want to avoid the trap of just listing out your responsibilities and instead go into greater detail about your successes and your potential for a positive future impact with this new organization. And as a final helpful tip, keep in mind the 60% rule. If you have done or can do at least 60% of what they're looking for, then you can consider yourself a solid fit for that role. Just make sure to emphasize the 60% of what you have, then demonstrate your interest and applicability in quickly learning new, systems, processes, procedures, technology, things like that. Employers don't honestly expect applicants to have 100% of what they're looking for. So use that 60% rule to guide you in determining what positions to apply to, so you aren't, unintentionally missing opportunities that could actually be a good fit for you. Okay, so let's finish up today's webinar, or today's main presentation, I should say, with some direct quotes from recruiters. These come from articles, blogs, and LinkedIn posts from some of the recruiters that I closely follow. So I'll pause for a minute here so everyone has a chance to read these bits of advice from recruiters. So you'll notice that a vast majority of this advice was included in some way, shape, or form throughout this presentation. It's important to keep your finger on the pulse of new trends in the world of recruiting, because preferences, styles, and strategies do change over time. I highly recommend that job seekers, just like the career expert team here at FlexJobs, consistently review the guidance and advice that recruiters are posting, particularly on LinkedIn, because then you have the direct ability to engage with their advice and begin to develop relationships with those recruiters. You'll likely find some conflicting advice out there, but this is because recruiting isn't an exact science. As mentioned, recruiters have different preferences, different styles, different strategies. So what works best for one recruiter might not work as well for others. I tried to outline for you the most widely accepted appropriate measures for networking with recruiters, but remember to pay attention to what seems to be working for you and what isn't, then adjust your strategies as you go along. All right, so let's go ahead and end our presentation with some reminders and action steps that you can take going forward. So firstly, make sure that you are researching companies carefully and thoroughly reviewing position descriptions before applying to jobs so that you can better understand what will be important and relevant to your audience and then tailor your materials accordingly. Next, like we've mentioned, you want to update and tailor your application materials, but also your online profiles so that you are ready to actively engage to help improve your visibility. Remember that you should be reaching out to the right recruiter after you've applied to positions of interest. And then don't be afraid to follow up with recruiters if you haven't heard back from them yet. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into our Q&A portion of our webinar today. As a reminder, a copy of the recording as well as resources presented will be emailed out to you within the next week. Do be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered there. For even more tips, tricks, and resources, I recommend going to the FlexJobs blog. You can see the URL there on the screen. It includes a vast amount of free articles, resources, webinars, and videos for members and non-members alike. So with that being said, let's go ahead and open up to your questions. All right, everyone, we are going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar today. Before we get started, could someone let me know in the chat section if you're able to hear me okay? Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, my name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of the career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions today. Just as a quick reminder, please put those questions in the Q&A tab, not the chat section. And if you see a question that someone else has asked, you want to hear the answer to, go ahead and click that thumbs up button so I know which questions are most popular. So, let's go ahead and dive in. Our first question here, it reads, I used to think of recruiters, especially third-party recruiters at recruiting agencies, as genuinely helpful advocates for job seekers, sincerely trying to find a suitable job for me. But lately, the recruiters I'm encountering seem more like strict bouncers at a bar, rejecting the vast majority of candidates and only permitting admittance to an elite few. Recruiters used to chase me and contact me frequently to try to sell me on a variety of roles. Now they ghost me even when I kindly reach out to them. What's going on and what can job seekers do about it? So, yes, this is sort of a succinct analysis of how a lot of people feel about recruiters. And, in terms of what is going on, a lot of times this has to do with, the current job market. So, if we're thinking about our current job market right now, we've seen companies do some pretty large companies do some pretty large scale layoffs. We've seen, concerns out there about potential economic recession. So that has other companies kind of, pausing their hiring practices or maybe slowing down their hiring practices a little bit. We see a lot of job seekers that are looking for new opportunities for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're looking for higher pay or remote opportunities, things like that. So the market is really saturated with job seekers right now, which means, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily okay, but it means that recruiters kind of have their hands full. They're dealing with much larger applicant pools than previously. They have a plethora of potential candidates to choose from more often than not. So even though you are, reaching out to them in a kind and polite way, doing maybe some of that follow-up research, things like that, you might still encounter recruiters that ignore your message, or maybe they were engaging with you for a time, discovered that someone else was a better fit for the role that they were trying to fill at that time, and so then ended up, quote unquote, kind of ghosting you afterwards. So that happens. Doesn't necessarily mean it's okay. Doesn't necessarily mean that knowing that alleviates the sting of having that happen. But at least knowing that can help you understand a little bit better of why this might be happening. So one of the things to emphasize, and I saw some people emphasizing this in the comments and the Q&A, and we talked about it in the webinar, is just to keep in mind that you are the only person that is going to have your specific best interests in mind all the time. That recruiter has their own interests and the interests of the company in mind first and foremost. So, if you've been hitting it off with a recruiter and having a good relationship with them, and messaging them, and then all of a sudden they kind of ghost you or stop responding to your messages, try to not take that personally. Try to look at it from their point of view, that maybe they are just overwhelmed with candidates right now. The role that they thought you could be a good fit for, maybe it didn't end up working out, or the company chose somebody else. So, now they don't necessarily have that time and energy to devote to their interactions with you. So try to not take those things personally, and try to keep in mind that while they can be a helpful component of the job search, they are not there to do the work for you or to put your best interests ahead of their own or the company that is, contracted with them. So, don't rely on them too much. You do still want to build these relationships with them. And even if a recruiter does ghost you, keep in mind they might reach out to you in the future. So how you decide to view that relationship with that recruiter could limit or open you up potentially to new opportunities. So depending on how you decide to go from that point, could dictate whether or not you can maintain open lines of communication with them and identify new opportunities through them in the future. Or if you are, you decided to maybe take it a little bit more personally, which I understand. I would have some trouble there myself, not taking these types of things personally. If you decide to take it a bit more personally and like, okay, I don't want to work with this recruiter in the future, you could potentially limit yourself to opportunities. So try to keep an open mind. Try to see it from their perspective a little bit more. Know that it really is something that the job search really is something that you need to be fully invested in yourself and not reliant on others. And I'm not saying that as a criticism or anything like that, but taking that sort of mindset can help guard you from those feelings of frustration or disappointment or feeling discouraged when that does sometimes happen to you when working with recruiters. And we could of course see a market shift where all of a sudden the power is back in the job seeker's hand, because employers have more jobs than they can fill. And then you might see recruiter attitudes change. They're no longer the bouncer, as you put it, but now they're the person reaching out constantly and saying, hey, I have these roles to fill, would love to get you in for an interview, would love to get your resume. So you will see those shifts over time. It's just that we are in a really challenging landscape right now, and that can definitely be tough. But hopefully there was some helpful guidance there with my response to that question. But I really do appreciate you asking that, because like I said, I think that's sort of a succinct summary of how a lot of people are feeling right now in terms of working with recruiters. So thank you for asking that question. Um, okay, here's another good question. So, in the webinar, keep saying that we should apply for a job before reaching out to a recruiter. But what about recruiting agencies that ask you to submit your resume into their general database? I assume the answer is to submit your resume to their database and then reach out to a recruiter individually. Yes, you can kind of take both strategies here. If you get an agency recruiter that reaches out to you, that's trying to build their candidate pool, that hires for the types of roles that are, sort of reflected in your LinkedIn profile or your resume, certainly never hurts to submit your resume. Say thank you for reaching out, I would love to hear about potential opportunities. You don't necessarily know which companies, unless they're forward with this information, which companies they're working with. So certainly doesn't hurt to give them your resume so that they might keep you in mind for future roles. But then also be looking for those individual roles that you want to apply for them, and then try to find if there are some internal recruiters that you can then reach out to follow up on your application there. So you can kind of take both strategies there, and it certainly doesn't hurt, like I said, to get yourself included in some of those candidate pools if you do have recruiting agencies reaching out to you, or you find some folks through LinkedIn that work for these types of recruiting agencies and are maybe some of those more specialized recruiters that align with your area of expertise. So don't, as the saying goes, kind of put all your eggs in one basket. Take sort of that diversified approach, but it certainly doesn't hurt to work with those types of recruiting agencies, but then also target individual or specific internal recruiters for jobs that you find on your own and you want to apply for. So good question there, and I appreciate you asking that. Okay, so how do you define hiring manager? Is that someone in the HR department, or is it your potential manager in your potential department? So good question, and it can vary based on company. So sometimes, the hiring manager is someone within HR who gets to make sort of these overarching decisions in collaboration with other people that you might be working with more directly. More often than not, the hiring manager is going to be someone in the chain of command that this role would report to. So maybe not your direct boss, but maybe the person above them or the person above them. So the hiring manager is the person that kind of gets that final say in terms of who will get the job or not. They of course solicit feedback from recruiters, from other people that you maybe meet with or interview with throughout the process, but the hiring manager is that person with the final say. And where they are housed within the organization does tend to vary company to company, but typically that hiring manager, that person with the final say, is someone who is directly employed by that company. So it wouldn't be an external recruiter. The external recruiter is not going to be that hiring manager with the final say. But good question there, and sometimes it is hard to differentiate those different terms. So thank you for asking that. Okay, another good question here. So, what if your recruiter, so a recruiter you've been, working with, building relationships with, isn't finding you anything, and you need a job immediately? So, just to kind of echo a little bit of what was said throughout the presentation, we mentioned a little bit here already in the Q&A. That recruiter is working for that organization, not for you, unless you have gone and hired someone to do some of this job search for you, which is an option. These are sort of sometimes called like reverse recruiters, but again, they're trying to achieve their own quota or hit their own metrics. Like even those reverse recruiters don't necessarily have your best interest in mind. They're just trying to find you a job, not necessarily the right job. So again, use a diversified approach. Build those relationships with recruiters. If you want to try to hire a reverse recruiter, you can take that approach, but you should also be actively scouring job boards, actively trying to network with people that you already know, build bridges with people that you don't directly know already. Really try to leverage a lot of the different job search strategies that are out there. Don't be reliant on just one strategy. So if you're feeling that pressure, you need a job immediately, I would recommend, yes, working with recruiters, yes, networking, but then also actively identifying job postings and submitting tailored, targeted applications, like was mentioned in the presentation, for those jobs, and then trying to follow up with recruiters as well. So really make sure that you're not putting your fate in someone else's hands. You're using that diversified approach and really trying to maximize your chances of success there. Okay, so we're a couple minutes over time. I do want to try to squeeze in one more question here, and this I think is a good question. So it's asking, do they, meaning recruiters or hiring managers, really want or actually read cover letters? Most don't require one. So I always recommend, and do this myself, to write a tailored cover letter for each job that you apply for. And you want to take it as the same sort of approach with your resume. Like you're attempting to tailor your resume to demonstrate that you are the best fit for this specific role. You don't want to just give a generic list of all the things you've done, all your skills, all your accomplishments. You want to think about, okay, what is going to matter to this specific audience? using that job description and any supplemental research that you've done, and then tailor both your resume and your cover letter for that specific job. Now, that being said, getting back to your question, do they really want one? Are they actually going to read a cover letter? So the statistics, the most recent statistics that I have read show that the vast majority of recruiters and hiring managers like to see a cover letter with your application. That doesn't mean they're actually going to read it, but if they see that you uploaded a cover letter, that says some positive things about who you are. It means that you're genuinely interested in the role because you took the time and initiative to write that cover letter. It shows that you are committed to effectively conveying the ways that you can meet their needs. It speaks positively about you. So I always recommend writing a cover letter. It can only help you. It's never going to hurt you. So even if there is that possibility that your cover letter is not going to be read, you still want to submit it. It still looks good, even if they don't read it, that you have submitted a cover letter. So I always recommend writing and submitting a tailored cover letter, because another reason for that is you don't know. You have no idea. Are they going to read my cover letter? Do they actually want a cover letter? You have no idea if that is their preference or not, or how they feel about cover letters. So it's always better to submit a cover letter, even if they don't ask for one, but especially if they do ask for one, and make sure that you are tailoring it for that specific position. And I've also seen statistics too that a really strong cover letter was enough for a lot of hiring managers to then grant an interview to a candidate who looked less than stellar in their resume. So if you're worried about how strong your resume is, try to improve the strength of your application by writing that really heavily tailored cover letter that addresses some specific needs of that company that you are capable of meeting. So I will, always stand on that soapbox and shout that advice. Cover letters, I think, are a great idea. They really only can help you. They're never going to hurt you. Okay, so I know we have quite a few questions that we did not get to. We are quite a bit over time, so I do apologize for that, but I sincerely hope that the information in this presentation was helpful for you all, and that you were able to get some helpful information as well from the Q&A. So thank you all for taking the time to be here. Again, really hope that this was helpful for you. I encourage you to join us for future webinars. We do host weekly Q&As that are 30 minutes long, where we are just answering your question. They're typically on Wednesdays. There is one this afternoon that I will be hosting. So please feel free to join us if you are available. Again, really appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best. Take care.